Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm very pleased to be here to give this seminar about evolution, knowledge, and sustainability. This seminar will start from a book I authored with my research team, which was published last January 21. The book is titled The Hyper Citizen Word Game. We will focus basically on its key concepts. I will try to make an effective summary, trying to balance theory, some methodological systemic details, and some possible policy guidelines, trying to balance these dimensions. First of all, want to start with a famous Japanese proverb, which states that vision without action is a daydream, and action without vision is a nightmare. What I mean is that normally it's very important to balance research and policy, theory and fieldwork in a general vision, which is usually provided by a more political science-based mindset. And at the same time, the mindset of legal studies can be very strategic and important to create a very effective operational execution. So, of course, it would be a very stupid way, as I am a professor in sociology of law, to debate if the sociological mindset is better than the legal one or vice versa. They are both strategic, both important, and they are complementary and interconnected to develop an effective strategy and execution in public policies. Today, we will be focused on evolution, sustainability, and knowledge. The matter of reliable knowledge, the matter of valid knowledge, is a very serious matter for social and political sciences. And also every day we are observing many debates about ecology or about the pandemic, debating, how can I say, some scientific matters politically or some political matters as if they were scientific, which is very tricky. And it could generate an overwhelming production of useless and contingent rules. From this point of view, if you analyze the big picture, as the past president of Brazil used to call it, the big picture of Fernando Henrique Cardoso, who was the president of Brazil, but he was also a sociologist of development. Every strategic plan, every policy should start from the big picture if you want to solve problems. If you just follow up contingent rules and contingent cases, you will get lost. Because the entropy, the fragmentation would be so high that it would be impossible to keep the agenda together. From this point of view, I was saying standards or global standards, I would not say universal standards. Global standards are much more strategic than an overwhelming amount of rules, as it was clarified also by Niklas Luhmann, the matter of the evolution of a system and the matter of contingency. So the capacity of self-reproduction of a system, which in systemic jargon is called autopoiesis, the capacity of reproduction of a system depends very much on the capability also to manage contingency, but never depending on contingency. Otherwise, the self-reproduction of the system could implode. As I was saying, hyper-citizen is a key concept I developed with my research team working between Europe and Brazil mostly, to rethink the matter of global standards, including the matter of democracy. Democracy, if you want to talk technically, is mostly a method and a shape of government. It's not a value, and it's not a goal either. So democracy can work, democracy cannot work. Of course, if you think democracy is a value, you will do your best politically to let democracy work. Nevertheless, democracy is a method, not a scientific method, is a method in governance and government. So every method can work or can fail. Sometimes more democracy is better, sometimes less democracy is better. It depends on some pattern variables, on some technical conditions. I will briefly describe you using the concept of hypercitizenship. This concept describes a shape, a form of world order organization. And from our point of view, to debate ecology, or rather evolution, knowledge, and sustainability, which is also very much connected to ecology, but not just ecology. Sustainability is also economical, social sustainability, not just ecological sustainability, as you know. The matter of democracy is very much linked to the matter of the scale and leverage of the systemic organization of the political system. What does it mean? Consider the European Union. At the moment, we have 27 countries belonging to the Union as members. Some of them are full members, also including of euro currency. Some others, like Hungary, for example, are in a certain way on the doorstep because they are still using both the euro and the Hungarian florin. The currency code is HUF, as you know, maybe. So we have to elect the members of the European Parliament. And of course, in our European tradition, we take for granted that this election should be democratic. But we have to set a question. At the moment, when we go and vote for our European members of Parliament, we vote by member state. Of course, we know that in the European Parliament there are coalitions, alliances among parties. There is the Socialist Party, PSE, the European Socialist Party. There is the Popular Party, the PPE, or rather in English, the EPP. In English, we have the Socialist European Socialist Party. We have the Renewing Europe, which is the new name of the previous party of the Liberal and Democrats. And we have the European Party of National Frontiers, the party which sustains that Europe makes sense, but Europe is just a sum of member states, in which, for example, Marie Le Pen is. Okay, so there are many coalitions at the European Parliament, but in practice, when we vote for the European Parliament, in every country, we vote for the symbols of our national parties, of our different Italian parties in our case, in the case of Italy. And as you know, in Italy, probably, the Lega Party and the Forza Italia Party, you may like them or not, it's not my problem. We don't talk about political belongings or party belongings. In Italy, the Lega Party and the Forza Italia Party are allied, but in the European Union Parliament, they are opponents, because Forza Italia is in the EPP, while the Lega party is in the NF, the party with Marine Le Pen, the national frontiers of the Europe, you know. So it means that if you think Italian while you are voting, you are thinking you are voting for two allies, which in Brussels and in Strasbourg are opponents. So first of all, we have a problem of knowledge and understanding to deliberate. Are citizens responsible, aware, informed, competent voters about the structure of the European Party the European Parliament they are voting for? First matter. The second matter, what kind of election people, what kind of voters should we organize? Because as I told you, at the moment, the European elections for the European Parliament are on the base of national states. But what if European citizens, European Union citizens, voted on a European Union scale? In a certain way, it's more logic. If you are voting for the European Union, you are voting for the European Union. You are not voting for your own country and member state. So from this point of view, would it be more democratic and more effective to let voters vote for the European Parliament on a national state basis? Or would it be more effective and democratic to let the European Union citizens vote for European Union Parliament at large and European Union candidates? An example, whatever you think politically, if a candidate is Greek and this candidate is a candidate in Greece and you are in Italy, you cannot vote for that candidate for the European Union Parliament. Which, if you think so, it's pretty stupid. Because if you are voting for European Parliament members, your variety of choice should be across the Union itself. So voting for the European Parliament starting from the member state or voting the European Parliament starting from the European Union itself is a different matter of scale and leverage, which doesn't change the matter that the elections should be democratic, but it dramatically changes the methodological impact of democratic elections. Because as you know, the way you shape the rules of the game, in particular the laws which manage the elections, the way you, in a certain sense, shape the final result. Not the final result in terms of the single name elected, of course, but the final result in terms of the structure of the parliament. So in this case, an hyper-citizen mentality and mindset would be much more focused on leveraging and scaling democracy than debating democracy as a value. So probably in this case, you have a first example of how to consider sociology of law as a connection science, which has also the role to contribute to designing governance at large, global governance and the government at large. Once again, OECD, just to make another example, is working hard on rethinking taxation law more internationally and sometimes I would say transitionally. The BEPS was a good start and the first, attempt. Nevertheless, to let that process work, it would be strategic if OECD would develop its powers transnationally or even supranationally, because as far as it is the sum of the wills of the member states, the risk of high contingency would be extremely real, concrete, pragmatical. So wherever contingency appears, it means the failure of every long-term and wide horizon policy, public policy, including in the matter of taxation. In the chapter, you had the chance maybe to read, to take a look at least. We began with mapping sociology of law among political, social, and legal sciences. If you take a look, for example, at the social sciences, you can easily understand that through the centuries and through the globe, across the globe, legal studies passed through some steps. The first one, we call it a segmentation, which is the tribal organization of society. Tribes like the ones of the Native Americans, for example, Apache, Cheyenne, Comanches, or tribes like the Maori in Australia. In tribal organizations, normally, social norm and legal norm overlap, are the same. You don't need a written constitution, you don't need a civil code. There is a kind of social wisdom which sets the rule for the whole community. Good and bad are clearly described, and the wisdom normally of the elder people makes decision for everybody. Decisions are normally very simple about peace or war with the neighbor tribe, or how to find food, hunting, or trying to develop some agriculture, so to speak. Okay? Tribal organizations are very dense and very homogeneous. It means that values, traditions, norms are shared by almost everybody. And if it doesn't happen, you are marginalized. No way to be some way accepted if you are strongly deviant. Either you are a criminal or you are crazy in that case. In this case, you understand the most radical tribal organizations, which also we experience in Europe in a certain way through a feudal mentality. Feudalism was not technically tribal, but is the most similar European organizational model we have to tribal patterns. Every time we have a feudal area, for example, it opposes the idea of a more general, bigger picture. Because the more general, bigger picture, for example, voting the European Parliament members directly and not through the mediation of the states, would be in a certain way an increase of complexity, an increase of variety, and thus a strong reduction of density and a strong reduction of homogeneity inside the tribe. So this kind of mentality is absolutely against complexity, variety, enlarging the scale of democracy, because the more you do that, the more the maintenance of a homogeneous mindset inside the tribe becomes hard. In a stratified society, where stratification is the key model for organizing society, which is more or less the pattern of Europe from the Renaissance to the 19th century, more or less. You have a kind of homogeneity inside each strata of the society. Every strata is homogeneous inside, but the society in general is quite heterogeneous because we have at least three levels. We have the aristocracy and the upper class. We have the middle class, and we have the using a term I don't like, but I think it's clear for you, peasants and proletarians. Peasants from the country and proletarians from the city. In this kind of pattern, you have homogeneous regulations, norms, and rules inside the same strata. In a certain way, the law is equal to everybody belonging to the same social class. But in the matter of fights at court among different classes, the highest was usually the winner. Okay. Functional differentiation is the kind of organizational pattern of our current societies. We still have some tribal aspects, we still have some stratification aspects, but we are much more complex than this nowadays. And so it means that we are complex, we have a huge variety, we have different powers. Who is more important today? Who is more powerful? The Queen or the King? The King at the moment of the Netherlands or Jeff Bezos? Jeff Bezos, as you know, is a billionaire. He created the empire, the business empire named Amazon, but legally speaking, is just an entrepreneur. On the other side, the King of the Netherlands, I don't know how rich he is, I don't care, but just an example, is let's say poorer, just than Jeff Bezos, just supposing, but he has a legal power, as he is the king, that Bezos doesn't have. He can promulgate laws, which Jeff Bezos cannot. Okay, so in a functional, differentiated society, power, democracy, business, money, and so forth are much more mixed, and it's much more difficult to understand the flows of systemic evolution. So it means that you have, for example, a huge variety of values and lifestyles. In a functional differentiated society, you have the party against homosexuality, for example, and you have the party pro-homosexuality. You have the social movement for virginity till the wedding, and you have the liberal party for abortion, whatever, free sex and whatever. Because in a functional differentiated society, values belong to smaller spheres, not to the institutional power of the system. So the values are something which do not belong to the formal shape of the legal system. Otherwise, it would be a stratified society, not a functional differentiated society. I wish I'm clear enough. Tendentially, segmental societies normally were based on religion. There have been some exceptions, but tendentially, the religion was the benchmark for the social model of behavior in tribal organizations. It happened in Australia, it happened in North America, it happened in Mexican, South and Latin American tribes at large. But of course, there can be exceptions. It still happens in the tribal aspects of societies like current Libya or Syria or Maghreb, that you find a strong connection between tribal organization and the religion foundation of society. In the stratification society, you have the priority of rationality. I will not dig into depth about this because I think you know about it. Then actually, enlightenment in the 18th century Europe was the best example, for better and for worse, of what it means a stratified society based on rationality, or on the illusion of rationality, if you prefer, but the idea that rationality was the way to organize society. A functional, differentiated society like ours, the one we live in, is much more complex, as I already told you, and in a certain way, it just focuses on positive constructions. Positive not in the meaning of good, not in the meaning of values, positive in the meaning of mathematics or in the meaning of Hans Kelsen. Positives in terms of abstract, conceptual, artificially formalized. You know that our law in the Western world today is basically positive law. I don't think we have much space for natural law nowadays. And we can go through the matter of sociology of law dealing with legal studies. So when we deal with a functional differentiated society based on a positive, multidimensional, complex, artificial idea of knowledge and also of law, you have a very strong and important switch from the rationality of the Enlightenment or from the theological world order of the tribes. It means also that you cannot base law on nature, and on moral values from this point of view. It happened in the past, but nowadays the level of complexity of the law system, the legal system is so high that this kind of reductionism would not work. So what happens? It happens that in a functional differentiated society, the matter of the validity of law becomes the crucial one in sociological terms, because from Kelsen at least to Luhmann, also considering Robert Alexy. Robert Alexy is not a positivist scholar in law, but still he also adopted some mathematical models to classify law. You realize that validity is the unique, not the right way, not the best way in moral terms, is the unique way law can be managed into a complex functional society like ours. For the simple matter that if you find other kind of foundations in nature, in religion, or in social habits, you will have the problem of the link between subjectivity and contingency. So the risk is that you in general don't manage to give a formal, a foundation to law, not even at a formal level, because the subjectivity and contingency would overwhelm the matter of validity. In the history of political sciences, this problem was solved in a certain way, and in a very rough way, but very effective way, by John Locke in the Second Treaty of Government. In that treaty, Locke shaped the first distinction, the first separation of powers. For common sense, normally, if I ask you the separation of powers, you will probably answer me legislative power, executive power, and justice power. But in the original separation, this is Montesquieu, but in the original separation 1 century before of powers, the three powers were not like that, were not as such. They were legislative power, they were executive power, and federative power. So the matter, if you let me use this metaphor, the matter of meaning states, for example, like bricks of the Lego bricks you can put together, you can shape different ways. If you take a look at the map of our planet in 1890, in 1920, in 1950, for example, in 1991, and now, you can easily check that many states appeared, disappeared, reappeared. Serbia, for example, existed, and in the beginning of the 20th century, then it disappeared for a while, and then it reappeared after the dissolution of what we call now ex-Yugoslavia. So the federative power Locke described in the 17th century was probably a very useful initial approach to the matter of hyper-citizen global governance. States are not real, are not much more real than any other things, many other things we have around us. States are forms, are not systems. So if you take a look at the map of the world, as I told you, every 30, 40 years from the end of the 19th century, you will easily understand the contingency of the form of the state. What it means, what does it mean to be more practical? It means that evolution, which is one of the three topics of our lecture today, the other two are knowledge and sustainability. Evolution is turbulent, is chaotic, but at the same time, it is not so random as sometimes we think. And it means that evolution is also a matter of leveraging and scaling, not just a matter of more of something or less of something. Sometimes we think we can use the myth of resilience. Nowadays, resilient is a very popular term, but we forget that resilience is connected to recursivity. So when you change a variable in the society, it starts in a kind of spiral to impact on all the other aspects of society. There is no way to change one variable, letting the others constantly still. Knowledge belongs to the toolkit, strategic, epistemological, and practical toolkit, and methodological toolkit also, to understand that you cannot simply create a more resilient society by introducing one new variable or introducing one more element, letting the rest of society still, as I said a few seconds before. Sustainability, and I'm going to launch the break in a few minutes, correct, Luigi? Sustainability requires a systemic vision, a very huge capability to think global governance in terms of policy modeling. So not something which exists in nature and doesn't exist to manage something which exists in nature, but simply being aware that the political scientist and the law scholar are much more similar to the designer in architecture and interiors, for example, than to the biologist or to the physicist. We are seldom dealing with real things. We are dealing with constructions. A constitution is a construction, a state is a construction. And so through the years, also from this historical process analysis in the style of Norbert Elias, probably, we could easily understand that we are dealing with constructions, and constructions can be reconstructed, redesigned, and re-implemented. That's the important link between global governance and policy modeling. In this general frame, I would add, and I will add in the second part of the lecture, the sustainability matter, introducing you a four-step cycle, a cycle based on demography, development, technology, and legislative expansion, which is the general frame of the autopoiesis of the self-reproduction of complex systems in their global governance today, in these days. And I will frame sustainability in this four-step cycle. The cycle, I repeat once again, composed of demography, development, technology, and legislative expansion. We can also call it, according to the terminology of the important Dutch systemic scholar Lloyd Ledersdorf, we can also call it a quadruple helix of systemic evolution. But we'll talk about this quadruple helix after the break. Thank you very much.